Somebody cry, why?
Over a quarter of a century ago, Paul Simon travelled to Johannesburg in South Africa to record tracks with a group of township musicians for the album that would become perhaps his greatest achievement, Graceland. It was a project that became marred in controversy. Nelson Mandela was still in prison, and apartheid was very much in force in South Africa. An international boycott prevented artists performing in South Africa, but Simon ignored it, determined to collaborate in person with the black artists whose music he loved so intensely. The turbulence around Graceland followed Simon and his collaborators here to London's Albert Hall, where they performed in front of sold-out audiences.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hugh Masekela.
Outside, however, there were angry cries, crowds of anti-apartheid protesters. For me, tonight's film tells a truly remarkable story about the tension between creative freedom and political responsibility. Paul Simon, the curious, some might say the arrogant artist, just follows his ears in South Africa, falls in love with the genius of the township musician and with the music he encounters there. In tonight's Imagine, the filmmaker Joe Berlinger follows Simon as he travels back to South Africa for an emotional reunion with the musicians who played with him on Graceland, and who discuss with remarkable candor the controversy that surrounded the making of what is now regarded as one of the truly great albums.
A remarkable album called Graceland by singer Paul Simon grew out of a trip that he made to South Africa.
The Graceland album started out a cross-cultural experiment. It has become a worldwide hit. 5 million copies have been sold so far.
I really wasn't thinking that Graceland was going to have this kind of effect on people. I didn't think of it as anything other than a really interesting...
Something you love
yeah,
man.
Right. It was a music that I... Exactly.
But you can't miss the political side, you know.
Paul Simon's Graceland is a big success, but it's also controversial because Simon recorded the album in South Africa, and critics say he should have had nothing to do with a racist country.
The conscience of the world must be awakened to the horror of apartheid in South Africa.
We are calling upon all international artists to stay away from our country. What made you to go there?
I was invited there. I was invited by black musicians.
I'm going to Graceland, Graceland, to Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to Graceland.
When the artist gets into some sort of disagreement with politics, why are the politicians designated to be the ones to tell us, the artists, what to do? And we're supposed to follow. Otherwise, we're not good citizens, or we're not good...
I agree with you. You're not allowed to think, you know, not allowed to feel or have a political opinion. It's nonsense, man.
We both will be received in Graceland.
I remember when Graceland first came out, there was some controversy about it. And so it was just one of those things like, oh, well, it's controversy. I'm not going to buy that album. But when I went to hear him perform in a concert in Chicago, I was infected by the music.
She said, losing love is like a window in your heart.
Graceland was the Paul Simon record that kind of rocked a little harder than some of the ones just before that. The ones just before, of course, had great songs on, but this one kind of had a little bit more low end going on.
I'm on Graceland. Memphis, Tennessee, I'm on Graceland.
Music is the most unifying thing I've ever seen.
cultures have been swapping information.
It's only
for
12 notes, man. It's only 12 notes, man. Until God gives us 13, we all got the same materials to work with for 500 years. 12 notes. This is what music is. It's the voice of God, you know. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do.
Your #1 news and talk station. All right, I mentioned Paul Simon. He's currently visiting South Africa, commemorating the 25th anniversary of the release of Graceland. He plans to reunite the South African musicians involved with the original project.
The last time I was here was when we played. It was a long time ago. It was a long time ago. I expect to see a lot of changes, as any place would be after a couple of decades. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what we get. This is the story of how we begin to remember. This is the powerful pulsing of love in the vein. I'm trying to imagine it's the next few days and get my focus right. Going back into a rehearsal kind of frame of mind. See where everybody's at, like thinking about Ray. Well, I haven't seen Ray now since 1991. Oh, man, Ray! Isaac, I haven't seen even longer. Isaac!
Nice to see you.
Barney, I haven't seen him in a really long time. Oh, my God! We had an intense period of time together, and then we separated and went our separate ways, so we're always attached by Graceland. To the great Barney Rashabani. And now with this reunion, we'll finally get the chance to talk about how we made the record and going on tour. That'll be interesting to me, because it's the same event, but everybody's story is different.
Paul Simon is going to be giving, listen to this is exciting, an exclusive and intimate performance this Thursday evening in Johannesburg. Paul would like to invite a few select listeners to attend the event. That could be you. There is no chance that
I think all of us, we are like, oh boy, this performance, man. We have to get back into Graceland and just do it one more time, 25 years later.
Here I was, living in South Africa, and then here comes a particular individual called Paul Simon. For me, music is the closest thing to religion. And if it's utilized in the right way, it can inform and bring people closer, and they can find solutions to their problems. And Graceland did that.
I've been doing music professionally since I'm 15 years old, and in many ways, Graceland was the most significant achievement of my career.
I really think that the next generation still kind of has a pretty deep connection to Graceland. For a lot of people my age, it was really evocative of being on like road trips with their family when they were, 5 or 6 years old. And for us, we have specific songs where I think you can totally make the Graceland connection.
My perspective is that what Paul Simon was doing had a beauty to it. I think he had a great idea, creative idea, to mix his music and his rhythms and his ingenuity with some that he had found in South Africa. But at that moment in time, it was not helpful. There was this inconvenient thing called apartheid. It got in the way.
Apartheid was a system made to divide the people of South Africa on the basis of color of skin. The white South Africans were dominating everything under protection by law. And the whole apartheid system intentionally, deliberately set out to prove that black people were the most inferior beings on earth. And people of South Africa did not take this lying down, and we fought.
We were fighting for our land, for our identity. We had a job to do, and it was a serious job. And we saw Paul Simon come in as a threat, and we saw it as an issue. Because it was not sanctioned, as we saw it, by the liberation movement. And this situation was not about Paul Simon, it was about the liberation of the people of South Africa.
The criticism and the attacks on the album and on me was very hurtful. And I don't really know what the internal debate was here. I mean, I know what the result was, but I don't know who said what and why. From the South African side of things, there's a lot that I don't know. A lot.
So I was just thinking to myself, it's a bit surreal what's going on here, because the first time I saw you, it was on an album cover. We didn't meet, but we had that sort of relationship over the cultural boycott.
Right.
And here you are, 25 years later. I know you are a brilliant artist. I've respected you all my life. I know that you had no malintent in going. And I do think it's regrettable that with the brilliance of what you did with these musicians, there was this conflagration around it on a political level.
Well, this misunderstanding was really unfortunate. And it's been on my mind for all this time. So I'll tell you my story. You tell me your story. I was given a cassette. It was called Accordion Jive Hits by the Boyoyo Boys. I used to play this tape all the time. And, after about 3 weeks of it, I said, this is my favorite music. I'm not interested in listening to anything else. I found out that it came from South Africa. So I asked my record label, do we know anybody in South Africa? They said, yeah, there's producer Hilton Rosenthal.
I had the call from Paul Simon, and he said that one of the cuts on side 2, I think, was called Gumboots. And could I do some research? I asked Paul at that time what he wanted to do with the song. He said he had written some lyrics, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do, but that he just wanted to record the song.
Paul put the cassette in, played this thing, and he sang. And I said to him, you can just do that here in New York. Just get a couple of great players. You've got the instrumentation. The players could certainly do that. And he looked at me like, what? And he said, no. I'm going down there.
I really wanted to do that music, but I was very aware of what was going on politically in South Africa. So I call up Harry Belafonte, who I've known for many, many years.
When I spoke to Paul, I said, I think it's great that you're going. I think you should just let the ANC know, let Oliver Tambo and the leadership know. The ANC, the African National Congress, was the voice of black South Africans. I can introduce you to the powers that prevail to let them know what you're doing so that you can have all of the necessary passes on it. And I saw right then and there that Paul resisted the idea. Paul, as I recall, declared that the power of art and the voice of the artist was supreme, and that to go to any one group or another, for whatever reason, to beg the right to passage was against his instinct.
It was an adventure that seemed irresistible to me. And of course, I was fascinated and intimidated by the fact that I'm coming to South Africa. And I didn't tell Harry, which I probably should have done. Except it's like your dad, when your dad says, well, don't take the car, but you really have a date that you really want to go on, you decide you're going to take the car anyway. So I came with my engineer, and I was immediately struck by the extreme racial tension. And coming from a country that was racially tense, I was absolutely unprepared for what it felt like in the air. The law of the land was apartheid. Mandela was still in jail. De Klerk was the president. I was uncomfortable. But we got into the studio and began to record with this group called Tawe Matsecha. It was very exciting to see these South African groups come in. I was already familiar with their records. There was this accordion player named Ferrari. He didn't know who I was. He didn't speak English, but our interaction was really interesting because you give him a signal and you say, go, and he just started to play. And then everybody would fall in behind him. He was playing a melody on the accordion that I wanted him to play, and we got a really great sound. You know, it was kind of all over the place and needed to be edited and changed around.
When we started jamming in the studio with Paul, I didn't know him, you know. I saw this guy with cowboy boots, you know. And I was kind of asking myself, what is this guy trying to do? Because he's trying to, you know, fuse pop music plus, you know, African music.
The first day, the feeling in the room was a little strained. That's what I sensed. They're very shy. You know, am I doing the right thing? And it was really something to see them change. During the course of the session, all of a sudden, we're a bunch of musicians in this room having fun. Bagiti played a fretless bass. And when he plays a groove, the guy lights up, you know? He just lights up. It's incredible. And his intonation and his articulation was phenomenal.
I was just working as a mechanic. And then one day I got this call from the boss, and he said, hey, Paul Simon is in town, you know, and he's looking for some musicians. And I said, Paul Simon? Who is Paul Simon? I mean, I had no idea. And the guy tried to explain to me, singing all the songs, you know, like the songs from the Simon and Garfunkel, and I'm like, it doesn't ring the bell. And then I take my bass and I go to the studio. And so I meet Paul and Roy Haley, the engineer, and they're like, hey, man, let's play some grooves. Every groove we play, Paul just loved it, and then he would stop and change it. But we didn't know the groove is so good. Why is it changing? But he needed another part that we didn't know. Then he'll break and then give us different chords, and then we learn different things. And it was like going back to music school.
The initial recording sessions in Johannesburg were planned pretty quietly. I contacted the representatives of the groups that Paul wanted to work with, including producer Kaloy Labona.
Hilton said, could you organize the musicians that would play on the session? So I brought Bagiti Kumalo, I brought Vusi Kumalo, the drummer, and I brought Ferreira, who plays piano accordion. What attracted me was the way Ferreira combines what his left hand and his right hand is playing on the accordion. And I think that's exactly what drew Paul Simon to be like entranced with this music. We are at the house of the piano accordion player, Ferreira Mutuhela. We've come here to fetch him for this Graceland reunion project. This was the original melody that Paul Simon turned into Boy in the Bubble, yeah? And what he's saying here is that he's paying tribute to a beautiful woman that he has found and that he's happy with. He says the solitude of the place combined with the landscape gives him so much time to think of beautiful things that he then translates into the music. When Porere came to me, he was working in the mines. The way he plays a piano accordion is the voicing, how he's adapting it to suit the traditional Basotho melodies. And that's what led to the birth of Boy in the Bubble.
Do you think it will be interesting to hear him sing his song? We'll see if we can combine the two songs. So he begins, it's a verse form. I answer, verse form. He comes back, verse form. After that, we go to the chorus again. He sings again, and I sing against him.
So when
This is the way it happened. I mean, this is what happened in the studio. You know, somebody would play and I'd say, oh, that's good, let's do that, then let's go here, then let's go there, then let's do this. Oh, no, well, then Bagiti, you play here, then we'll try it. Let's try it again, let's do it this way and this way. Trial and error. So we'll try it now, we'll see how we see how many errors we make. Slow day, the sun was beating on the soldiers by the side of the road. A bright light shattering the shop windows, bombing the big cars wired to the radio. Slow day.
When Paul Simon was in South Africa in 1985, it was at a moment of high struggle. The apartheid regime were at their most vicious.
It was very scary. I was just a kid growing up there, but I just had no idea why there was so much problem. And people are running, the cops, they come in the middle of the night, start counting people. There was a point sometime I couldn't eat for 2 days because there was no food. And you know, my parents, they didn't know where they're gonna get the food the next day, so you just gotta hang in there.
Because the apartheid regime were at their most vicious, we had to ensure that by all means necessary, they are isolated.
The General Assembly of the United Nations called for economic sanctions, oil embargo, sports boycott, and cultural boycott of South Africa. Part of the cultural boycott was to call on all people who are engaged in cultural activities not to cooperate with South Africa.
What would the ANC hope that artists of other nations might do to help?
I think firstly we'd like them to obey the cultural boycott of South Africa to the letter.
We had been saying to artists all over the world, at this point in the history of South Africa, the expression of your support must be non-participatory. You can't go there. The way in which you interact with other peoples is on a free basis between free peoples.
I remember talking about the issue of Paul Simon, that I did not think that it was correct for him to come.
When I brought musicians to the Graceland session, I was patently aware at the time that there was a cultural boycott. It was risky, but our music is always regarded as like third world music. And I thought, if our music gets a chance to be part of mainstream music, surely that can't do any harm. So when Paul Simon came, I deliberately withheld some of the risks involved in doing this thing. I thought, what the heck, this is a chance in a million, we must do this.
Yeah. That's it. I guess she thought I was all right, in a sort of a limited way for an off night. She said, don't I know you from the cinematographer's party? I said, who am I to blow against the wind? I know what I saw, I say what I said, it's come and we go. This song was originally recorded with the General Sharinda and the Gaza Sisters, their Shangan.
The Shangan sound was electric guitar based with a pop band around it, and some very strange, to Western ears anyway, strange sounds of the female vocalists doing a wailing sound in the background.
It's different because it's like you are singing out of tune sometimes, but that is how it should sound like, you understand?
When General Sharinda came into the studio, they came in with the whole family, the mothers and the children. It was like a party. I was in South Africa for a very short time, like maybe 10 or 12 days, recording frantically, and it was exhilarating. It was really amazing. The album that preceded Graceland, Hearts and Bones, was a relative commercial failure. And my reaction to that, rather than thinking, oh, I'm dead, my reaction to that was, well, good, the next time I make a record, nobody will be looking over my shoulder, which is what they do, which is what they had been doing for years and years. What's the hit on this album? What's it going to be? Because had an unbroken string of hits from Simon and Garfunkel up until Hearts and Bones. So that was in my mind when I went to South Africa. Well, I can do whatever I want here, and I'm not going to get calls from the record company every week saying, how's it going? Or can you send us something? We're dying to hear it. They just, just left me alone, and that was good. With those groups that I knew, like General Sharinda and the Gaza Sisters, I really had a clear idea of what I really liked and what I wanted to record. So those songs where there's co-writing, that's because they were based on tracks that I had heard, and I could point to the record and say, can you play this, but change it a little bit here? And whatever writing was shared, we would share the credit and share the royalties. I thought about writing political songs about the situation, but I'm not actually very good at it. And here's an interesting thing. When I recorded with General Sharinda, a song that became I Know What I Know, I asked him, what's that song about? And he said, it's about, remember those 60s when, when girls wore really short skirts? Wasn't that great? So that's what it was about. So, I said, they're not making up political music. They're making up pop music. These songs are pop music. What was the other verse about the chicken and...
Oh, the other one, it says, it means slaughter an owl because there's no chicken, and you cut the head and throw it away. The body will look like a chicken, so don't worry. We will eat that in the train.
We'll eat it on the train. It'll look like a chicken. Cut off the head of the owl. It'll look like a chicken. And then, nobody will know. We'll eat it on the train.
Yeah.
That's what it meant. So I realized that instead of writing a song like Biko, the Peter Gabriel song, which I love, in fact, I recorded it, and is a great example of a political song. My idea was, they play their best, I'm going to play my best. I'm going to give them my best shot. I didn't come in here promising to do anything other than to make a really great record. They didn't say, come in here and tell our story. They just said, yeah, you can come in and play, we'll play with you.
I know what I know, I say what I say. We come and we go, that's the thing I keep in the back of my head.
The sessions were great, but the racial tension in South Africa was at such a level that it was palpable, even in the studio. Here's a kind of an example of what it was like. The Boyoyo Boys came into the studio and I said, you know, play this, and they couldn't play it. And when they came back like the next day, they still couldn't play it. And I'm really frustrated. Why is it terrible, you know? And one of the white engineers or assistant engineers said, well, now you see what we're talking about here? This is what we're talking about. You know, I mean, they can't do it. I mean, they'll tell you they can, but they can't do it. It was a racist comment. Did it bother me? It stunned me. You know, I didn't know. The epiphany comes from the next day when Ray Peary comes in. Ray Peary comes in with his band, which was probably the top band in South Africa, was called Stimela. And the drummer was Isaac Machali. So they came in and he was playing and I was playing with him and said, well, that's good. Why don't we do that? And he said, yeah, I can do that. And then I overdub, you know, another part on top of it. And I'm still thinking about the Boyoyo Boys. So I say, yeah, you know, just get that and I'll be happy, you know? So he does, he gets it. And I think, well, that's pretty good. He says, let me do the overdub now. So I say, yeah, okay, you know, go ahead, try it, overdub. And it's great. And suddenly I realize, you know, the guy's brilliant. I was ready to buy into the racist thing. You know, they fed it to me and they give it to you, you know? So you get a big South African lesson. We were all just meeting for the first time. They didn't know my political beliefs, and I didn't know theirs, and I knew that Stimela was a #1 group. But I didn't know that they were known as a group that was provocative to the police.
Sometimes at the gig, the police are waiting for us. They say, where are those Stimelas? We want those Stimelas. Where are they? Hey, they come with this tear gas and they put tear gas all over the place. People went like this.
I'm not afraid. If I have to die, and I die on stage, I'll be the happiest. But if I have to die on the street when somebody does that, that will be cowardly.
As a musician, I could see that things are bad, but we will keep on singing the song.
One day, Ray started playing the riff. Bwee-da-bop-bop, bwee-da-bop-bop. After we recorded the backing track, next morning I picked Paul up on the way to the studio and I said to him, I have a feeling that yesterday at least one of the hits from this album was recorded.
If you'd be my bodyguard, I could be your long pal. I could call you Betty, Betty, when you call me, you can.
Let me tell you my story.
Great.
I had been in exile for a while and went to live in England. These people were hunting my father, Oliver Tambo, as a terrorist. As the president of the ANC, he was an icon of human rights. And I grew up surrounded by revolutionaries. Our home was a hub for all exiles. So I met a lot of people in that time who showed me that this was actually a united struggle. And we formed Artists Against Apartheid to enforce this cultural boycott because we genuinely felt that if you go there, you become part of apartheid's attempt to gain international legitimacy and pull itself out of the sanctions that was gripping the country. And so when you came to South Africa, it wasn't the ideal form of cultural exchange. They weren't free people, Paul.
Well, why did they say come? Do you think they were all selfish that they did it? For 3 times union scale?
Yeah, I think if you went anywhere in the world and you said Paul Simon wants to perform with you, people would pretty much say, yes, I'll do that.
Yes, but I treated them as equals. They treated me as equals. We treated each other as musicians. We didn't have anything to do with color, race. It was purely music. And it wasn't lost on any of them, because here I come back 25 years later and those people are my dear friends.
Joseph!
Hey.
My brother.
Where's my hug? You come back with it. Oh. It's very special to work with Paul Simon because many, many years it was very difficult to work together with a white person. But when we started to work with Paul Simon, we didn't see a difference. We didn't see that he's white or I'm black. He's my brother.
You good?
You do it again.
Do it again. I'll be happy.
We'll do it forever. Yeah.
So glad to see you, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Joseph Shabalala from Ladysmith Black Mambazo came into the studio. And that's the group that I knew from a British documentary called The Rhythm of Resistance.
In townships outside the white cities, music happens everywhere. The Ladysmith Black Mambazo are a group who found exceptional commercial success. They draw on the Zulu tradition of the male vocal group to create a unique blend of African and Western harmonies.
The sound of Ladysmith Black Mambazo, it's a sound of everything that surrounds us, because we grew up in the farm. Birds singing, wind blowing, frogs singing, and some small insect. So the music is there all the time.
When I got a call, I just ran to my guys. Hey, I talked to somebody. His name is Paul Simon. He want to see me. I was proud of that. He want to see me. He want to talk to me. And the guy said, go there. Don't make a mistake. Please go there and come back and tell us.
Joseph Shabalala was very quiet in the studio. He was just kind of mysterious and quiet. So I didn't know whether he liked what I was doing or whether he liked me. And he gave me like 10 or 12 albums, which I used to listen to every night. I used to, listen to them. I would fall asleep listening to them. And I just became just, bewitched by Ladysmith Black Mambazo. Because they were so beautiful. I thought it was so beautiful that I was totally intimidated. They were so good at what they did, and it was so contained that I didn't really know at the time how I could possibly fit into their world, and didn't know whether they wanted me to fit into their world.
Paul was so polite. Paul has a special magic. Nobody has that magic. He just come to me like a baby. Like, Father, can you teach me something? And we hug. That was my first time to hug, especially a white man. When I finished that, I said, I'm in jail now? And Paul Simon was talking, and I forgot about that. Oh, yes. And Joseph Paul Simon from New York City. I just listened to your record, and then I think you can do something together. I'm a person who is just like, when you talk about music to me, let's do it now. And I say, yes, Paul, let's do it. And I said, all right, Joseph, I'll let you know where, when.
So we decided that I would write a song and we would record outside of South Africa. I didn't want to go back to South Africa. I wasn't comfortable. I wanted to get out of there.
Maybe there tonight could be a strong wind
We took it back to New York, and that's when the work really started. You know, putting it all together, it was a heck of an undertaking. The challenge on this album was there were no songs, there was no arrangement. So the challenge was editing, and lots of editing. You know, taking things from here and putting them there, take that out, put it over here, and recopying things.
If you heard what the tracks were originally without his magic and his echo and his devices that he used, it wouldn't sound so huge and so mysterious.
So we finished all our editing. We made tracks that had some semblance of a song there. And he went out and tried desperately to put words to each one. And he did. And he slaved at it. It was awfully hard because there's so much going on in those tracks. You know, they're very busy tracks.
Paul came back from Africa, and we met on holiday that year. We were at the same place in the summer on Long Island. I've known him for a little while as a friend, and he talked about this music, and I said, have you got it? And let's hear it, you know. So we went out in the car, and he played it on the car stereo.
When I was writing back at home, I would write a verse, it would be fine, and then I would write another verse, it wouldn't be fine, then I'd write a verse, it would be fine, and I'd say, yeah, it's all good except for that verse. I don't know why that verse isn't good. It should be. It seems like it's exactly the same as the others, and I'm doing the lyrics in the same rhythm. I really don't get it. I was really frustrated by not being able to get the lyrics to fit. And then I'd say, okay, well, let me really listen to what's going on. And when I started to really listen, then I realized that the guitar part was playing a different symmetry than I had assumed it was playing. And the bass was doing something that was much more important, and that you really might be better off following what the bass was doing. So I began to think about that and rhythm and what that meant and what effect that would have on the lyrics and what effect that would have on storytelling. And I began to raise the bar for my own writing.
Fat Charlie the Archangel sloped into the room. He said, I have no opinion about this, and I have no opinion about that.
So I ended up writing abstract or ironic but in either case, sort of sophisticated lyrics to what were sophisticated rhythms. So you get a song like Graceland where, you know, in the middle of the song, it's there's a girl in New York City who calls herself the Human Trampoline.
There is a girl in New York City. She calls herself the Human Trampoline.
A lyric that would never appear in a South African song. I mean, it's a very New York lyric. I mean, I wrote it while I was walking past the Museum of Natural History, actually.
And I'm going to Graceland, into Graceland, Memphis, Tennessee.
And I kept singing this chorus, I'm going to Graceland, I'm going to Graceland. And I kept thinking, well, of course, that'll go away because the song is not about Elvis Presley or Graceland. I mean, it's a South African record. But it wouldn't go away. And finally I said, you know, it's not going away, I better go to Graceland. I'd never been. I better make that trip and see maybe there's something about this that I'm supposed to find out. And had I not made that trip, I wouldn't have, you know, been able to have written the landscape that's, you know, is the first verse about the Mississippi Delta, shining like a national guitar.
Shining like a national guitar. I am following the river, down the highway, through the cradle of the Civil War.
And so the song took on a bigger meaning.
I'm going to Graceland, into Graceland.
It was a metaphor for a state of grace. I was taking absurdist lyrics, which I thought had no place with this rhythm track, and finally saying, well, maybe it does have a place. Sometimes when I'm falling, flying, tumbling in turmoil, this was something else that I was doing, was a lot of syllables.
This is what she means. She means when you're bouncing into Graceland.
This is what she means. She means we're bouncing into Graceland, which was also something that I hadn't done, which was taking the chorus word and putting it into the verse. Usually, the chorus has its own repetitive phrase or word, and you don't hear that word in the verse. But now I was saying, well, there's no reason to separate. They can bleed back and forth, and that's the beginning of saying, actually, these patterns that felt restrictive are not, they needn't be there.
And I may be obliged to defend every love, every ending, every dance. You are big geek shows now.
I remember he would invite me over to hear what he was doing. We did that a lot in those days. Well, I still do. He would have the backing tracks, and he would play those for me, and then he would just sing the words. And at a certain point, I said, Paul, this is going to be a really, really good record.
That's very good, guys.
That was the great gift that I received from making the trip to South Africa and, and collaborating with African musicians.
Somebody cry, why?
It wasn't until I got home that I started to think I could write a song for Ladysmith Black Mambazo. And so I wrote Homeless, imitating them, and sent to go to Abbey Road Studios in London.
London? First class. London! We were so excited and so satisfied. And then we said, woof, this is it. Wonderful.
Somebody's homeless, moonlight sleeping on a midnight lake.
Then we decided that we would get Ray Puri and Begidi and Isaac and form a kind of a studio band. And I invited them and Ladysmith to come to New York to finish the album, and everybody was getting really excited. First of all, they got off the plane, they were met by a limo, and a white driver, and they drove into Manhattan.
I used to see a limo in the movie. And I mean, in South Africa, I don't remember seeing any limo anyway. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? And it was a cool thing to be in the limo and you're served whiskey and that kind of thing. You're being treated like a musician.
I remember it was Begidi or Isaac said, we want to go to Central Park. Where do we go to get a permit? And I said, you don't need a permit. You just go. And go anywhere you want. Those guys were coming from an imprisoned society into freedom for the first time. It was very touching. They were free. Free. The record was supposed to come out in the spring of '86. And we were booked to do Saturday Night Live, and Warner Brothers decided to postpone the record to the fall, but we were booked for Saturday Night Live. And so I said, well, we're all here, we might as well try and do another track. So we did what became Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes.
They were doing the song, and then they stopped, and Paul Simon said to Mr. Shabalala, can you bless this song? I'm just doing the song at Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes. And then so Joseph he took a piece of paper and then the pen, and then he wrote it down. Only a few words. What was the word?
Akujwayelekile kanjalo kodwa ezinsukwini zanamhlanje
Sibona kwenzeka kanjalo.
She's a rich girl. She don't try to hide it. Got diamonds on the soles of her shoes. He's a poor boy, empty as a pocket. He's empty as a pocket with nothing to lose. Sing tonight.
Zulu lyrics means akujwayelekile kanjalo. It's not usual. Kodwa ezinsukwini zanamhlanje, but in our days sibona kwenzeka kanjalo. We see those things happen. Amantombazane ayazondla. The women, they can take care of themselves.
We decided to put Ladysmith Black Mambazo at the end of the track, and they had never sung with musicians before. They always sang a cappella.
We were there maybe not even 2 hours time. And then Paul Simon said, right at the end, just do this. Ta-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na-na. Oh, yeah. Well, everybody was having a good time. After that, we went to do a Saturday Night Live. And everybody was very nervous about that. They said, the audience there, they are very mean. We didn't care because, we believe what we have. We said, if we sing for you, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
And we went on the show and we sang these songs that weren't out on a record yet.
Do you think people are going to like this when you do it?
I'm not sure.
That's why I have this expression. Counting on you for that, yeah. It doesn't work with this cutting.
23 wide.
Like anything that had been on the show before. And you could just feel, you felt it in the studio, you knew it was happening in the country, and it was just, boom.
That I kind of lost my place in one of the things. It was really surprising because nobody had ever heard it before on the planet, and everybody wanted Ladysmith Black Mambazo. They became international stars and remained so. So almost 2 years after I first went to South Africa, the record finally came out.
There's so much despair coming out of South Africa, so many haunting images of death and oppression. Sometimes hard to remember that life there does go on in all of its forms. And a celebration of the black life of South Africa can be heard in this country in a remarkable album called Graceland.
It was a slow day.
All artists who have long careers periodically hit dead ends. And if you're going to keep a career going, you have to keep being a kid again. And that's, in a way, what he did with Graceland, was to be a kid again, to be back to three chords, to be bouncing around, to be making joyous, danceable music.
And I could say, ooh.
It's my favorite album of all time. It just sort of opened up a space inside of you. For myself, my deep and now abiding interest in South Africa was stirred by first listening to Graceland.
We are going to Greece.
Simon's work, Graceland, recently won a Grammy for Album of the Year.
But somewhere around 3 weeks after it came out, the first criticism came, which I was completely unprepared for. And the criticism was, you broke the UN cultural boycott.
Paul Simon has run into political problems in South Africa. The African National Congress protested Simon's recording in South Africa, a violation, they said, of the UN's cultural boycott.
The album had the controversy around it. It was very vexed going to South Africa at that time. And you got the feeling that Paul Simon had gone in there on a stealth mission and collaborated with the South Africans. I mean, he was collaborating, it turned out, with the right South Africans, but the whole project seemed a little odd.
A lot of the press picked it up in the United States, Rolling Stone amongst them, and kind of saw an opportunity to beat up on a famous guy who, maybe made a mistake. And so they were all, Paul Simon didn't ask permission from the UN, and is on the blacklist from the UN. The intensity of the criticism really did surprise me, and part of the criticism was, here's this white guy from New York, and he came in and he ripped off these poor innocent guys.
There is an aspect of this album that bothered me initially. You have this rich white guy singing on top of these South African singles.
To demonstrate how his work melded with that of the South Africans, he first played a track of a popular local band. And then the same tune after it had been Simonized.
To me at the time, it seemed kind of like the tourist picture. Here's me in front of the Taj Mahal in my t-shirt waving. And that bothered me at the time. At this point, it doesn't. I think he was right. And he was ahead of me. You know, he was saying, you know, we can make this amalgam work. We can make this combination work. And I think a lot of people at the time had this knee-jerk reaction of, you know, rich, privileged white guy, poor country, must be bad.
How can you justify going there, taking all of this music from this country? It's nothing but stealing. Come on. It ain't nothing but stealing. How can you just go and tell me, oh, I went to there and I went
Graceland
to
is a collaboration. You don't believe that it's possible to have a collaboration?
It's always an interesting debate that, you know, it's happened all the way through history, particularly through black history.
Do you believe that a collaboration is possible between musicians?
Between you and them, no.
Why?
You don't understand.
Why? Because I'm white and they're South African?
You don't understand.
With the Beatles, we actually recycled American black music to Americans. We came over and we were really doing a lot of Motown. So, but a lot of white kids hadn't heard Motown.
You don't understand the music at all.
Well, you are saying something that these musicians, in fact, disagree with.
I accepted Paul's music and what he'd done the minute it came out. I had no resistance to that. I'm a fan of his, and I liked very much so much that he's done. And to have that album in particular, which was filled with moments of great genius and delight. A lot of that welcoming, however, was under the understanding, or at least the belief, that he would square what he was doing with the powers who led the resistance to apartheid, which was the ANC. It never dawned on me that that was not the case. And I didn't know that that was not the case until Paul called, and we met in my home. And he explained to me that he had this crisis or this obstacle before him.
Harry said, you should talk to the ANC. So when I met with the ANC, I said, hey, I have no fight with the ANC. We have no fight with the ANC. We support the ANC. We'd be willing to do concerts for you. And they said, look, here's the problem. You went to South Africa, but you didn't ask us. And the way we're structured is, you have to ask ANC if you're going to do anything. So I said, oh, really? So is that the kind of government you're going to be? You know, so does that mean I have to, you know, like, you have to show you what kind of lyrics we're going to write? Or if the musicians union decides to vote this way and you don't like the way they vote, then you'll change it around? I mean, that's just a government that just, you're going to fuck the artists like all kinds of governments. What are we talking about here? No.
What was their response?
The guy's response was, hey, personally, you know, I agree with you, but that's what policy is.
When you have a boycott, it's not flexible. And for many people, that was the issue. Is Paul Simon bursting the gates of the cultural boycott open?
Say no to apartheid. Say yes to freedom.
We were part of this international sanctions campaign, which was cultural and sports and business and military, and in all of those areas. It wasn't about, well, we have a military embargo, but this American tank, that one can go through. You know, it was complete. And it was complete for a reason. Because you can't ask of everyone what you don't ask of one.
Oh, Hugh is here. Here comes Hugh now. Hi, Hugh.
How are you doing? I'm doing good, man.
Hugh Masekela is one of the great South African musicians. He's an international star, and he was a political exile. Hugh connected up with me in London, and we began to talk about touring. And I don't think that I could have done it without him.
B flat, size 1, I do, 4.
Paul had just come from South Africa. And he said, listen, I just did this thing and I'd really like to take it all over the world. And are you interested? I said, of course. And I said to Paul, it would be good then like to pull in like a Miriam Makeba, because I was anticipating the troubles also.
And here now is Miriam Makeba.
Miriam Makeba became the most visible African artist in the 1960s when nobody had heard of artists from South Africa. She was the first artist to really break out hard. And she was the first person to conscientize not only the world, but America especially, about what was happening in South Africa.
Would you not resist if you were allowed no rights in your own country?
We'd been away from home by that time, me and Miriam, over 25 years in exile. So I spoke to Miriam, she's interested. And I knew it was going to be great. We were going to be like pigs in mud with all that was going to happen.
Windows, the bomb, and the baby carriage was wired to the radio. These are the days of Miriam.
The boycott stated that South African musicians could not play anywhere in the world. Paul decided that it was a risk he was prepared to take.
Touring with Graceland was actually quite tense at times, particularly in Europe. Before every concert, the police would come with bomb-sniffing dogs and go through the whole theater. We had a couple of theaters evacuated and shows postponed because of bomb threats.
The day he arrived, a hand grenade was thrown at a building housing sound equipment to be used during the concerts. A group calling itself the Azanian National Liberation Army claimed responsibility. More violence was threatened unless Simon called off the tour.
I remember when we were in London, especially, we performed at the Royal Albert Hall. I think we were there for about 10 days or so. And of course, we had the anti-apartheid movement protesting.
Outside the Albert Hall, leaflets critical of the activities of the star are presented to his bemused fans.
At one point, somebody called the hotel in London and ordered the South Africans to go back home. I was in the room with Ray Peary. And Ray said, Asante, do you believe this? We face apartheid every day. And you ordering us to go home? Are you crazy? I've never seen Ray so angry.
I remember I got a call to the hotel in London. I got to go and see the ANC. I went to a pub, and then I met some of the senior members of the movement who wanted to know, what are we doing there? Then I told them that, no, we're here to perform. Perform with whom? With Paul Simon. They told me, don't you know that there's a cultural boycott? And I said, okay, tell me, like I'm a 7-year-old, teach me. What did I do wrong? I don't understand it. I'm the victim here. I live in South Africa. How can you victimize the victim twice?
Ladies and gentlemen, Hugh Masekela.
That militant approach was at the core of the criticism that was leveled against me. And had it not been for Hugh Masekela and for Miriam Makeba and Ray Peary and all the South Africans who were on the tour who said, stop, what are you doing? You know, we want to be out here, we want to show our music.
There's a train that comes from Namibia and Malawi. From Lesotho, from Botswana, from Swaziland, from all the hinterlands of southern and central Africa, this train carries young and old African men who are conscripted to come and work on contract in the gold and mineral mines of Johannesburg.
There would be press conferences all the time, and the press conferences were like just people who were just hoping that I had made some kind of ridiculous mistake. But when it hit the fan, Hugh and Miriam, I mean, they could barely be contained. Hugh would say, what did you ever do for South Africa? You know, I mean, there were times when we really had to hold him back. Hugh wanted to be in a fight. So mostly, we were trying to explain that we were as anti-apartheid as could be, that Hugh was in exile, that Miriam was not allowed to come back for the burial of her daughter, that we were very much against the regime.
And to think about the loved ones that they left behind and may never see again.
We used to have furious arguments about the boycott, because I just said, it's great and it's helping South Africa, but when you start to also ban South African musicians who can't make contact with the rest of the world and they are outstanding artists, you can't be hard on people who are already suffering in South Africa. You can't witch hunt your people. This show is going to be a smash and it's going to play to many people who've never heard of South Africa. When I was in exile in Botswana, I had thought of joining the ANC. But over the years, I've learned that if an artist or anybody has really something to say about their concerns for the well-being of people, then they're in the wrong place if they join a political party, because they have to then follow the strict rules of the party. And I've never been able to live under rules.
We went to Zimbabwe.
Mama Africa, the queen of South African music, Miriam Makeba.
I think the idea of us singing the South African anthem, it came from Paul. It was the forbidden one at that time. As soon as we start the song, Paul would step back because he didn't understand the lyrics, But I think after 2 or 3 days, we said, no, Paul, you have to learn the lyrics because we are all one here. And this is about you and all of us. So you need to learn the lyrics. So we taught him.
To be standing on the stage with people whose lives were scarred by apartheid was very, very powerful. I really felt privileged and honored to be asked to be a part of it. As Graceland became a phenomenon, people began to put a very clear human face on the victims of apartheid. Suddenly, here's Joseph Shabalala. Suddenly, here's Miriam Makeba. Here's suddenly these charismatic, gifted people, and they are revealing a magical world. And people said, oh my God, what do you mean that that's going on there? This is really a crime. Not that they didn't think it before, but suddenly it became a very powerful, emotional realization. And that is what was going on with Graceland.
But you can't forget that all of them who had performed with you out there returned to a country in which they had no citizenship and no rights. So, as people themselves, it may have been good for them in terms of their careers. It may have been a wonderful thing in terms of spreading the knowledge of our music. But, they are individuals. And we were a nation under apartheid. And so whatever was good for the nation came first, not what is good for a few individuals.
But what did the artists have to say about that? Because my experience from my own country and in general is that there's a certain hierarchy. At the top are the politicians, and behind the politicians are the mysterious people who have money and power. After that comes the warriors. Then comes the economists who say, This is how a structure must be. And somewhere down the list comes the artist. And when the artist comes in, the politician says, we really need you to come and play for this fundraiser. Oh, we have a very important dinner. We'd like you to come and sing a few songs acoustically after dinner. The artists are always treated as if we worked for the politicians.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome to this reunion of the 25th anniversary of the release of Graceland. These are the musicians who played on the record and toured with us, and it's been a great joy for me to reunite with them after so many years.
That was the flaw in the cultural boycott, saying, we won't let you come over here and record and bring what you know to intermingle with what we know so that we can grow, so that we all can grow, and so that we all can grow and speak the deep truth that artists speak. Mississippi Delta is shining like a national park. I am following the river down the highway through the cradle of the Civil War. I'm going to Graceland, Graceland, Memphis, Tennessee, I'm going to Graceland.
If there's anything that can conquer the world, music, a song, you don't have to understand the language. You just have to understand the feel. I mean, it's 13 notes and every musician plays, we're all playing around 13 notes.
Turn around, jump shot, it's everybody jump start. It's every generation who's a hero of the pop chart. Finishing is magical and magical is art. The boy in the bubble, the baby with the baboon heart.
Music evolved the way the album predicted. A lot of people make music this way now. This album is early sampling. This album uses something from elsewhere and puts you on top of it and is a layered assemblage of places and ideas. And welcome to hip hop. A man walks down the street, he says, why am I soft in the middle now? Why am I soft in the middle? The rest of my life is so hard. I need a photo opportunity. I want a shot of redemption. Don't want to end up a cartoon in a cartoon graveyard.
You Can Call Me Al is really the story of somebody like me who just, goes to Africa with no idea and ends up having some extraordinary spiritual experience.
He looks around, he sees angels.
Angels in the architecture spinning in infinity. Amen, hallelujah, and starts off with, why am I soft in the middle? The rest of my life is so hard. It was a self-obsessed person becomes aware. When Mandela finally was let out of jail, everybody was ecstatic.
Thousands of people gathered, waiting for the first words in more than 27 years from Nelson Mandela.
I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy, and freedom for all.
And we are homeless, homeless. We're moonlight sipping on a midnight.
And then, ironically, we had the pleasure of being invited by the ANC to come and perform in South Africa at Mandela's invitation.
In the news this morning, Paul Simon opened his South African tour last night with a concert in Johannesburg.
The UN and the ANC believe that the cultural boycott should be lifted, and they've made that announcement.
I've never gone into any of these struggles not believing it was going to end. All oppression has to end. And I think that art played a huge role in defeating the apartheid system. All the artists. And I think Paul was one of them.
I think the thing is, we are today free.
Yeah.
And the journey to freedom was not a straight road. And there are those like yourself who have, in some people's view, a misunderstood legacy when it comes to the cultural boycott. But that doesn't go to you. It goes to a political situation which was forced on all of us.
The power of art, it lasts because the political dispute that we had, it's really gone.
That's it.
But the music still brings people together.
That's it.
So, that's it. I make my case on behalf of artists, and I apologize to you if my lack of awareness caused you any feelings that I was harming the cause. I certainly never meant it.
I know.
You know that.
I know.
Good.
Somebody say we let bygones be bygones. We're welcoming to all, and that includes Paul Simon, because we have no malice towards you. We do not consider you somebody who tried to stop our struggle. We consider you somebody who fell into the whirlpool of that struggle, did beautiful, creative things within it, but who was subject to the political storms that were raging at the time. But we love you. You're a brother, and you have our respect.
I'm happy to hear it.
Okay, man.
Thank you.
Senanzinjan Maya Chabula Basitanda Yo